Emmanuel, the God with us who saves.
I am nothing.
God is all.
Father, I love you.
Come, divine will, to think in my mind,
to circulate in my blood,
to look with my eyes, to listen in my ears,
to speak in my voice,
To breathe in my breathing.
to beat in my heart.
To move in my motion.
to suffer in my suffering, and may my soul consumed and fused with your will be the living crucifix, emulated for the glory of the Father, to pray in me,
And then to offer this prayer to yourself as mine, to satisfy for the prayers of all.
to give to the Father the glory that all creatures should give him,
To infuse in me the faith of Mary, most holy, in order to possess you as she possessed you.
to infuse in me the hope of Mary most holy, in order to desire you as she desired you, to infuse in me the charity of Mary most holy, in order to love you as she loved you, to adore in me, and since your will multiplies acts to the infinite, thus I intend to give you the satisfaction as if
All had assisted at Holy Mass.
and give to all the fruit of the sacrifice and impetrate salvation for all.
O Jesus, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I offer you my prayers, works, joys, and sufferings.
All that this day may bring, be they good or bad.
For the love of God.
For the conversion of sinners, in reparation for all the sins committed against the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Amen.
Mary Immaculate, Star of the morning, chosen before the creation began, destined to bring through the light of your dawning, conquest of Satan, the rescue to...
Hi, good evening. Welcome to Heart Talk. I'm Baby Rita. You know, the past months before the elections were quite a difficult journey for every Filipino. God was with us in all those turbulent days. People made hardcore choices to be rooting for pink or for the popular candidate red. Families disagree among themselves and friends debate and argue on their choices. The verbal or text exchanges were full of hate and anger, filled with attacks of deeply rooted insults. It was a one-way fight though. The BBM Sara presidential candidates kept their cool. And the passionate, aggressive ones were coming from the Leni Robredo group. They had one huge advantage though. They have the support of the Catholic Church, and the attacks were coming from our bishops and our priests too. And we have never seen our country so hurtfully divided. Well, everything is all over now, and we hope, yes, we hope that everything is done. May 9 elections happen to be orderly and peaceful. The ballots have been counted and the Filipino people have spoken. The overwhelming victory of Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. as the newly elected president with 31 million plus votes and the new vice president Sara Duterte with more than 32 million votes happened surprisingly. So tonight we have invited special guests who are very much involved in bringing out the truth about the accusations against the candidates and that people like to persecute. Certainly, our special guests made a huge difference in changing the minds of our people. It will be very interesting. So stay with us as we figure out what really happened in this May 9 elections 2022. May I now call on my co-host, Mr. Rick Saludo, who will be happy to introduce our two distinguished guests. Good evening, Rick, and good evening, friends.
Good evening, baby, and thank you to all of us who are together again right after the elections and able to just apply the faith to what's going on all around us. I thank, of course, ETVN for bringing us together again today, and we have a great lineup of guests today, not only to tell us what went on, you know, the past 3 months and beyond, but also to really bring the faith into the world that we are all getting all uptight and intense about pretty much every day, online and offline. And so I'd like to introduce our first guest who's with us. And she really brings to the program today a very, not only extensive, but intimate knowledge of history. That's the word for it. No? She was involved for a long time serving the government, the nation, during the first Marcos administration, and continued her service after that administration ended in her own various ways of really chronicling and finding out what's going on post-Marcos and bringing that knowledge, sharing that knowledge to the country, to the world, which is very important if we are to really assess what happened in our history. So without further ado, I welcome Rita Gadi, who is, of course, known to so many of you already. Good evening, Rita.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Rita.
Thank you so much. That was rather lengthy. That was historical too.
I thought you're the best person to invite after the elections.
Oh, I saw.
Yeah, well, of course, remember of, we know who won, right?
Yes, of course.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah,
So we
yes.
have to discuss all of these things and how it was so divisive, this campaign period, the past 3 months, right?
Politics is that way. You always have divisions everywhere when you have candidates actually belonging to one political party and all of that. So if we are going to look at the way division is coming from, that is where I think this program is most important. Between all of these gaps, the spirit must come in.
Yeah, the spirit must come in and the truth. And that's another reason why your presence is very important, because you were witness to a lot of the truth,
Right.
which unfortunately gets snowed under in our very intense political climate. So we'd appreciate your sharing in that respect.
And your memory is really something, you know. It's,
Well, if you've covered the Marcoses from 1965, from the first presidential elections all the way to 1986 and all the way up to this day, then that's a lot of, that's a whole maleta. A treasure chest, I should say, of memories, yes.
A
But-
baul.
Exactly. But when I speak of them and when I speak of those episodes and those events, Rick, baby, we must always remember that I can talk of this because I was there.
Yeah.
If they have to be supported by documents, I have the documents. And there is a personal knowledge I have insofar as those episodes are concerned. So it's not hearsay. It's not anything that I pick up from anywhere. I've kept a diary from the first day. In fact, I have a map of the Philippines where we traveled during that first campaign. And you could see that the names that I wrote there were the political lords of the provinces. Believe it or not, these names are still familiar
Yes.
today. You have the grandchildren
Well, wait,
still present. Yeah.
Introduce first our second guest. We'll get back to that.
Yes, before now our second guest is a former seminarian, so we're happy to bring his knowledge of the faith into our discussion. At the same time, he currently writes articles for international publications, and that gives really a perspective that is not only of a Filipino, but really of a citizen of the world. And I'd like to welcome Francis Pacheco for his perspective on the elections, the Marcoses, and the Philippines.
Thank you very much. Well, if at all, I'm just a simple citizen who wants to break through the echo chamber. As you know, a lot of the youth are also divided along partisan lines. And I always believe that if you stay within your echo chamber, it is not only a disadvantage to yourself, it's a disadvantage. It's a disadvantage for democracy. So here I am, just a simple citizen who would like to see things, at least from the Christian point of view.
We'd
Thank
like
you.
to hear from you, being a simple citizen. We have complicated citizens here. We may be senior, but we're also on the positive end that we have we're so rich in experience, no? Right, Rita?
Complex. I'd much rather use that word complex, not complicated, you know.
Okay, let's start talking about this unique campaign that we had, you know, the huge crowds, and also at the same time this fighting, the arguing, and the role of the social media. What was the role?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody?
Yeah.
Rita?
Some time back, I talked about this, and I said it is a rising multitude. And the phenomenon actually is that. Where are they coming from? So we looked at the demographics of the people that joined, and you could see it's a mixture, not just in the age brackets, but also of the, you know, I find it sometimes, I find it uneasy for me to say A, B, C, D, E. We are all just the alphabets, actually, you know. So there is no category that you could say. And this crowd that has joined not just the caravans, those in the motorcycles, those that have been walking towards the venue. And this goes on both sides, both, not only on both sides, but on all sides of the candidates themselves. I think that is very healthy. The division comes from the way they conduct their campaign, from the statements that they make,
Right.
and from the comments that are also undertaken by the people around them. It is sad because, again, as this program should bring out, there ought to be just a common bond of everyone. You aspire for a certain position, so you're asking about this great crowd. Yes, it is a phenomenon. Because if you look at the crowd, for instance, of the presumptive president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., then you would wonder, whatever happened of the 36 years that almost on a daily basis, they were vilified with so much anger and hatred? Where are they coming from that you have a crowd that still supports him? Maybe that could be a subject of discussion too, and analysis. But it doesn't take a rocket brain, you know, to just say that that's the way it goes.
And you know, the commercial media, I mean, talking about the mainstream media, they keep referring to him as the son of the dictator, you know. That to me was a little bit negative. And every time he's mentioned in news, you always refer to him as the son of the dictator. You know, would you consider the former President Marcos a dictator, considering the fact that
He was a strong man.
Yes, a strong
but
man.
I'm just saying, you know, there was a sort of like an insinuation there immediately, right?
Yeah.
Branding, yeah.
Yeah, branding, yeah.
Ironically, that actually might have helped his campaign. You see, as clear from the surveys, President Duterte was not only popular, but seen as the kind of strongman leader we needed during the pandemic, during the downturn of the economy. And so every time they would refer to Bongbong Marcos as son of the dictator, they were actually making him look like a tough strongman like Duterte, which of course helped his campaign because he was identified with the popular leader.
Yeah.
But which he is not.
Well,
I mean, he was not on the line of dictatorship and so forth.
Not a dictator, but at the same time, because people wanted a strongman like Duterte, it actually got him votes. I think got Bongbong votes. Those who certainly were looking for that
the thing
personality.
is, you sort of like you are reminded of martial law, and martial law seems to be negative, no? But if you look at it, it's not really a negative thing because it really saved our country from communism.
There were certainly,
Yeah.
I mean, Rita
Because-
would know exactly what was going on at the time.
So Rita, talk about that.
Well, if we go back in history, why was martial law declared? I think there were so many speeches made by the President Marcos himself regarding that. But those who lived during that period, what was happening? We had the Communist Party, and we had the New People's Army, and we had the National Democratic Front all together, and they would have wanted to rip the country apart and take over government. It's not as simple as that. It was actually happening. And it was culminated with the bombing of Plaza Miranda, the bombing of several places, and then you had also the warlords who were using, likewise, all of these terrorist activities for their political agenda. On the other hand, the other half of the country, Mindanao, the biggest island we have down south, had an independence movement. They wanted to secede. It's not an ordinary secession. They were actually supported by one of the richest country in the world, in the Middle East, and that was Libya. Can you imagine Colonel Muammar Gaddafi extending logistical, moral, and spiritual support? So that was the country then, torn apart by the secessionist movement to divide the country. You see that term, it comes back only in history. Minsupala, what is that? Mindanao, Sulu, and Palawan.
Oh.
That was how, and there are powers outside of our country that balkanized the world. North and South Korea, East and West Berlin, North and South Vietnam. They wanted to do something here too. North and South Philippines, regardless of who the rebels were, communists or the Islam secessionists. That was the country then. You saw, Rick, that was how difficult history is when you do not exactly position yourself at that particular era, and that was it. So the center must hold. Remember, Abraham Lincoln said that if he did not declare martial law, even though martial law was not in the American Constitution, we would not have the United States of America. That's exactly what Marcos did. He had to hold from the center. That's why he called it a revolution from the center. And he staked his reputation, he staked his family's security, he staked the office of the presidency, but above everything else, he staked his honor. That perhaps is what we have to record. Honor is most important, and that is what exactly he stood for. So that was the declaration of martial law. Everything else that happened during that period, 1972 to 1981, again, we have records in this, and it's going to take us, what, a whole month to discuss
I'm
exactly
just
what
saying,
happened.
Martial law was legal then, and he kept on consulting the members of the parliament or the Congress at that time, no?
We did not yet have parliament at the time, but he
Still
was
Congress.
consulting, yes.
Consulting, yes.
He was consulting the opposition too.
Yeah. So if dictator siya, he would never consult anybody. He'll just, declare martial law. But
And
there was a reason for it.
He really made sure that he followed the law.
He followed the
And
law.
so, it went to the Supreme Court. He
Yeah.
allowed it to go to the Supreme Court and be, of
That's
course,
what
the
I'm
Supreme Court
saying.
ruled in favor of martial law being properly declared. I'd like to ask Francis, of course, that's a generation
Yeah,
apart
Francis
from
is
you.
listening and
I'd
learning
like
a lot,
I'd like to see,
I
get
wasn't
your
born at that
thoughts
time,
on
so.
it. Yeah, exactly.
You're learning a lot though,
I
right?
am.
And I'd really like to, I was kind of out of it at the time, partly because
Well,
I was in high school. So
I was very
yeah,
much part of it.
I was
was so
I was in
involved.
high school, and when it was
Well, our
declared,
age is showing. It's okay.
we were sleeping overnight at school, and when we turned on the radios in the morning, we thought the radio was broken
Yeah,
because there were no stations.
Exactly.
Anyway, Francis, your thought.
As I said earlier, it's difficult nowadays because people just work within their echo chambers. It's a term that has garnered some weight during the Trump and Clinton election, for example, a few years ago. Right? It's a circumstance where people that are like-minded just stay within their group and close themselves from outside opinion. I seem to be a victim of that, not by choice but by circumstance, with my circle of friends, with my network. And so I thought, well, I thought I have to see beyond, this immediate thought bubble, because, like I said, it's dangerous. And so, looking back at just what happened barely 2 weeks ago, it was divisive in the sense that decades of relationship have disappeared overnight, simply because of partisanship. You have friends unfriending each other on Facebook, which is not really the worst thing.
Yeah.
But what's worse is sons discarding their mothers.
Right.
Where the son of this senator,
Legarda.
Senator Legarda, he disowned his mother in the public square. And so you have to think, at what level do you go on for your principles? Sure, everyone has. But at what level do you set a limit where I have to do this against someone who raised me up and supported me all throughout?
Yeah.
So that's what bothers me.
That's an extreme thing, you know. But even in my own experience, I'm not going to talk further about it, but our own family, you know, we had a really misunderstanding, or we became all wounded. We got hurt, exchange of words, and also your best friends, you know. And it was really painful because I don't have to apologize for my vote, and I don't need to apologize, right, for who I'm supporting. Yes, I'm supporting BBM, so that's my own personal conviction. And it didn't come overnight, you know. I went on research. I looked at all the videos of Rita, you know, and it made me understand. It's not only that. My cousin Ching Posadas, Tongson, kept telling me that she is a convert because of the tapes of Rita that made a lot of difference. But I don't know if the Marcoses know that. But her tapes are really volumes of it, really based on facts and truth. And it opened many hearts and many minds, you know, that it wasn't that bad at all, the way they presented it, the way they brainwashed it, brainwashed us, you know. So
I think the big lie here is that they position this election as a battle between good and evil. It's a kind of Kool-Aid that I did not drink.
Picking up on that, I did not encounter too much difficulty with my relatives. But the thing that hurts me is you see people of the church, the same religion, the same faith, pretty much one group calling the other evil or darkness, which I thought, wow, you know, you believe in the same God. Leave it to God to call whoever, you know, but...
To label people evil, and you also evil if you are supporting that person, you're also evil.
To use what would be really worldly political categories to make a judgment that is really for the Almighty to make. I thought that was extreme, and it divided people who shouldn't be divided. I'm sure the Lord didn't want His children to be divided among each other. Yeah.
Rita, don't you think that's one of the reasons why we are all divided and so also very harsh in insulting others? Because the church, our church itself, really was promoting divisiveness, you know.
Exactly. You know, I had a radio program some time back, and the name of my program was Sentido Común.
Okay.
Common sense.
Common sense, yeah.
And I've always read an obituary to common sense, actually. But in that program, I've always emphasized, Rick, we are composed of body, mind, and spirit. Body, mind, and soul. Okay? We take care of our nutrition. We eat good food, or at least as best as we can. We educate ourselves, or at least we read books, all of this in a library, to educate our mind.
Yeah.
But how about our soul? Who takes care of it? And that is the essence of life itself. So you speak of this division. Well, we have just divided the human species as just body and mind. But the soul is somewhere floating, where the conscience is, sitting in a corner. And that's exactly why this program is so important. We speak of politics, but we have divided politics as only taking care of what? The body and the mind. Where is the care of the soul? Now you speak of the priests. You speak of those who are with us in the same religion. And you wonder why they speak of evil and of goodness. They don't even know where the soul resides. Because the soul is a spiritual being. We're only just travelers in this earth. And what lives forever, and actually where we are supposed to be going, is where these priests and bishops ought to be taking care of us. Have they taken care of our souls in such a manner that they will not be screaming out now that you are evil? Where were they when children would take drugs, when the rate of our teenage pregnancies is rising, where you have not just, we speak of poverty, but do you realize, has anybody gone into the home of what they call the laylayan? And why is it that there is so much abuse? Because they don't have any space to live in. They sleep all together. At one time, I was even suggesting that maybe they could even put divisions Not just walls, but just a division. The boys and the men on one side, the women and the girls on one side. But it is not done. It's never done. If you go to these houses, again, there used to be a time, Rick, when the priests would stand by the door after Mass, after services, and they would talk to the parishioners.
Right. I remember
They
those
practically
days.
knew everyone. Where are they all these years? In the, well, you speak of Marcos, and they say that there is a Marcos rising now, so that is the evil that they have to confront. Well, where have they been? All these 36 years, maybe that's the question we have to ask. Have you ever really taken care of our souls? There was a time when there was a lot of criticism against our police. And there was one man, I think it was Bato, who said, maybe they should go into some kind of an internal purgation to relieve themselves of whatever it is. That should be the role of the men of the cloth. I will not speak further, but when we speak of
Would you like
good
to
and
comment on
evil,
that?
yeah, perhaps that
Francis?
is where it all begins.
Well, I have, as an ex-seminarian, I have experience of this pastoral care towards the flock within the Philippine setting and within the American setting. And what makes the American experience quite different from the Philippine setting is that priests and seminarians in America tend to focus more on the sacraments, those that nourish the soul. Whereas within this Philippine setting, it's more about, you know, a lot of their work is infused with, and I don't think not a lot of people know this, is infused with what's called liberation theology. It's a school of thought within the Catholic philosopher, priests, or theologians that get elements from Marxist ideology. Basically, it's, you know, you try to bring heaven on earth. It is ideal, but is it real? I don't think so. So I think that is the kind of danger where you have priests like, I don't want to name him, but he's the priest who likes to jog and does not have any hair. So there is that element of sort of militancy that shouldn't be, where they confound caring of souls with changing the system. Of course, it's, you know, everyone wants a better world, but if you try to bring heaven on earth, which is impossible, that's where a lot of problems come.
Exactly.
I'm glad you brought up this heaven on earth, because the Catechism of the Catholic Church actually says that one of the great apostasies that it warns against is the idea that you can actually have heaven on earth, that you can create a world that is perfect. And our faith says, no, you can't do that. You have to, you know, God has created a perfect world, and He will receive you into Himself. That's how you get the perfect world. And so, but then you are right. You know, the church has kind of tried to become really that idea of bringing heaven on earth and actually realizing it here. And sometimes even compromising the faith just to achieve that end. So the faith or the religion is being used to achieve political, social ends.
But the saddest
And
part,
that's the part that, well, undermines the faith. Yeah.
the saddest part with my own experience with them, no, with the priests, they sort of like very much lack in information. They don't go beyond just researching, Googling, no? Because there's some things that I know that they don't know. Why? I went to Congress, I researched on all the bills that were passed before and all her beliefs and what she was standing for. And yet they just ignored it. They just, every time I mentioned something, it's, oh, that's not true. You're just destroying her, you know, like that. So I think they were remiss in finding out the truth, trying to find out the truth, digging up facts, old facts, but still very relevant. And that's why we need Rita here, you know, because we have to unearth and sort of like change a bit of their perception. Because up to now, they have not congratulated our president-elect, right? He won overwhelmingly, 31 plus million votes. And that is something historical. Diba?
Apparently, what has been revived was exactly what was happening 36 years ago. So that the hatred, the rage, the anger, whatever else, whatever adjective you could use regarding that, it was a Marcos versus an Aquino. So that was the time when the country was really divided. But history will show that despite the fact that there were really very serious campaigns during the time, and the same crowds that you would be experiencing, we experienced these past campaigns, but at that time, you did not have so much of of all of this, what you're talking about now. Two issues actually are the ones that were brought out then, which has been brought out again now. One is the declaration of martial law and the human rights violations during that period.
Yeah.
And the other issue was the wealth of the Marcoses. And so that is why you have the term magnanakaw, or the thief, or bring back whatever it is you stole.
Mangdarambong.
Whatever it is. So I
That's
could
so
discuss
painful.
that, but it's rather lengthy.
Yes, oo.
So, but what is happening is, as I said, it has brought back what it was then. It is really something strange that after 36 years, these things have not been resolved in the minds of those that are opposing the Marcoses. So that is what I feel should be undertaken now during this period.
Well, I guess what hopefully will move things along are two things. One, the great majority of the electorate of Filipinos seem to have come to terms with that. That's why they were able to elect another Marcos overwhelmingly. And it's now incumbent on those who have issues with that to dialogue with the rest of the country, because the rest of the country is overwhelmingly wanting to move forward with this leader. The second thing is, and I bring in the faith again, we really have to be careful when we start using religion to disparage and really demonize people who are really just trying to engage the political issues with their own perspective. And
you can see from the slogan that he has, pushing for peace, unity, progress, and sort of like lift up the people who are in need.
You're
right?
talking about the presumptive president.
Yes.
And
I don't call him president-elect.
Yeah. The president-elect, yes.
President-elect na.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
there's no such thing as presumptive.
Also, I think on the level of policy, if you will, the church document called Gaudium et Spes specifically forbids the church taking any partisanship, right? So, to the credit of the CBCP, they did not endorse any candidate. They just said, vote according to your conscience, which is, the most obvious thing to do. So that's on the policy level. But in another level, you have, when religious groups become partisan, outrightly, specifically endorsing this candidate and vilifying another. One a potential failure there, or one potential fallout is, what if the messenger fails? What if the opposing camp won and was not able to deliver her results? Would that not be a great humiliation to the church who supported her? And so I think that is why it is proper for the CBCP to not take any stand. And I think it's also a learning experience where the church officials should not take any stand as well, because there is always that possibility that their manok, right, their pambato.
Yes,
exactly what happened.
And what is undermined is the prestige and the stature of the church.
Of the
which,
church itself,
if you undermine that, well, you compromise souls.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
But they're not really supposed to endorse a candidate.
But we are the church.
Oh, we are the church.
They are only
Exactly.
priests and bishops.
Yes, right.
We are the church.
And nobody's
that,
perfect.
I think, is
They're just
what
as
we have
human
to
as
stand.
we are.
Rick would know this. In the In church history, you have all of these episodes of the ups and downs of the church. You had the time of the Borgias. You had the time when even St. Thomas Aquinas has written about this quite extensively. And you also had a period when the church also held civil power. So you had the Bishop of Canterbury, was also the mayor of Canterbury. So when we look at church history, and that is perhaps where this men of the cloth now should look back in time, where they have failed the faithful and what has happened then. You had the Crusades, for instance, also. So all of these episodes in church history will give indicators of why things like what is happening now is happening. And somehow, even the men of the cloth who have been trained in theology, you know this extensively, you study this all, not just church history, but as I said, the ups and downs of it. They should have been able already to take into their own manner of behaving what they have been as far as the church is concerned in the past. I go back to my earlier statement. We are bothered by all of this, the way they judge. But aren't we all judges too? We judge our neighbor, we judge our children, we judge everybody. Judge not, as we are told. But do we really apply this? Then we ask the men of the cloth, are you judging also and dividing us between good and evil? But
Well,
why do we not?
Certain statements seem to show that.
Exactly.
And taking off from your point about looking at history, if you look at history, what comes across often is that when the church actually starts playing with worldly things, they tend to mess it up, because, and half the time, two things happen. One, they're really ignorant about the actual lay of the land on a lot of these issues. And I have to say, talking with some priests at this time, they really are very much lacking in the political knowledge. But the other thing is that you corrupt the religion.
Exactly.
You corrupt the religion because then it is used for something that is really a worldly undertaking. And very sadly, that's not what our Lord wants. The religion is supposed to help us get to heaven.
Yes.
Not to be used as an instrument for earthly
and save souls, bring souls up to God.
Very, very sad. And,
the bigotry, to leave it all. Yes.
So, Rick, in contrast, okay, the INC and the Pastor Kibuloy all had a different kind of view. Yeah? What can you say about that? And we all love our Catholic faith. We all love our Catholic faith.
I mean, I would not presume to talk about other faiths. No, of course they have their own view, and they seem to be very closely linked to secular affairs, as we are too. I mean, I wouldn't say the Catholic Church is not in that category, but I guess the difference, the thing you hope, is that we will not ever compromise what the faith is really about, which is saving souls. Now, when sadly a bishop would say that 31 million people were seduced by darkness in this election, how do you think a lot of those 31 million will now look at the church? Will they then still listen to the church, who says that they're been fooled? I'm not sure that is good for souls, frankly.
Precisely.
Even though for some of them perhaps that might have happened, but if you apply that to 31 million Filipinos, of which 25 million are Catholics,
Rick,
very, very
disturbing.
Yeah.
You and I, we work so hard on doing this Eucharistic Marian prayer caravan.
Including one for the elections.
Yes, yes. We had that before for the pandemic, and it really was very helpful. And of course, we know that prayers are really powerful, but this particular time, May 1st, Rick and I, and very few of us, went to pray intensive prayer under the heat of the sun in front of the Comelec building, right? And we prayed so hard. Me, I'll be honest, I didn't pray for a particular candidate to win, okay? I prayed for the divine will to prevail.
Yes.
I prayed that it would be God's choice. Whoever will win will be the choice of God, and there's no question about that, So that was my prayer, and I consider this an answered prayer. And now I hear somebody higher up in the church saying that it's all work of the devil, what happened. It's the work of the devil. I mean, all of us, we were like 30 people, went around, blessed with the Blessed Sacrament, blessed the seats of power, like the Senate, the Batasan, and Malacanang, right? And we blessed all of these mga PNP offices, Supreme Court, all these offices up to the Batasan and all. And we felt like parang first of all, I asked for support. They didn't give us support, right? No time for us, no time for me, no time to give you support. But we did what we had to do, and I know that our prayers were answered, Rick. What do you think?
Well, the hope is that the elections would go through and really reflect the will of the people. If the surveys, which I believe in, were done properly, it seems the elections seem to have reflected it. And now PPCRB, who is tabulating, double-checking the election returns,
They match.
they match up to like 99 point or 98 point something.
That's supposed to be the Catholic arm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we are predominantly a Catholic country.
Exactly.
If we divide the world between Islam and Catholicism, that's the way it goes. But the question comes now after your statement. 31 million of those who voted for what the men of the cloth say is evil. What happens now to the Catholic Church when 31 million of them actually went against what these men of the cloth are preaching about? So you see how dichotomous it actually is.
I will note, though, that in my view, there is an outspoken minority in the church that may have taken a very strong partisan position. But the great majority have their own views, which the way it works in the church, whoever speaks first, the tendency is the rest of the hierarchy will not dispute it, just to avoid a public spat among clergy or bishops.
Just to make it
and
clear.
that's what happened.
Just to make it clear, we are all devout Catholics. We love our faith. We live and die for our faith. We're only saying this to analyze and maybe learn from our mistakes. Learn from this experience of being divisive and promoting divisiveness, hatred, and anger. And definitely, there'll be more elections coming. And this might be the reason while the mga laylayan went up in arms, all voted for the other side, all voted the red, for BBM. Because maybe they got tired of hearing all of this negative comments, right? What do you think?
Well, regardless of the message, the other camp failed to package that in a language which the common people can understand and relate with. I can say 1,000 times over, murder is evil. But the way I say it sometimes has a greater effect than what's being said. So I think the words that really come to mind is, the message is out of touch. The message is true, of course, to the point that it became meaningless because of the way you delivered it. As you know, Filipinos in general are very emotional people, right? We're so unlike the Germans in that regard. So
we're passionate.
We're passionate, right? So I think with all the more reason that the message has to be catered, personalized, customized, and has to really touch people, not just on an intellectual level, right? But on a level where you and I can have a meaningful dialogue. That did not happen with the other camp.
The other thing I think we just have to point out is that actually the support for the winning candidate was in all social classes.
Exactly.
C, D, and A, and C, D, E, and AB as well. He got more than 50% in all the income classes. So it wasn't just failing to reach the massa, which that was a problem, but at the level of those who are affluent and educated. I think there what happened was the very outspoken and really sometimes mean and condescending approach of one camp absolutely turned off a lot of voters. Exactly. And I'm not the one saying this. A professor from Ateneo de Davao pointed this out. that there was a repulsive, so those are his words, a repulsive and condescending attitude among one camp, which turned off. That's not the way to convince people to vote for your candidate by saying they're stupid.
Yeah.
And BBM camp never really answered back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Go ahead. I'd like to take off with a quote from President Marcos himself, because as you were saying that, well, they failed to deliver the message that they should have delivered. When the cases were being filed against the Marcoses in Honolulu and then eventually in LA and then in New York, well, prior to that, we were already receiving many of those documents here in Manila. By the way, our sincere condolences to Lolong Lazaro. He was responsible for many of the background and research materials that we needed in the trial of New York, because we received the documents and all sorts of evidences that were being forwarded here to us. So at one time, after being held back, I was on hold order from the Cory government for quite a while, but when I was able to leave and visited the Marcoses in Honolulu, so we were talking about the cases that were already actually filed. And so I told him, Mr. President, there are so many of this, so many of these documents that they are using against you. And he said, you know, Rita, exaggeration is another form of falsification. So there is what you said. 36 years, that's exactly what they've done. I was vilified for 2 years straight on almost daily basis.
I can imagine.
Yeah. My notoriety has become almost international. And I was not even the spokesperson of Marcos. I was just handling coverages in Malacanang and the visits of
And you were
Mrs.
also
Marcos
traveling
abroad.
companion
Yes.
of Mrs. Marcos.
But still, I was vilified for 2 consecutive years. But the Marcoses were vilified almost every year, every time an issue comes up.
Yeah.
And so, 36 years, Rick, 36 years, Francis. Exaggeration is another form of falsification. That is where I bring out that quote, exactly. And then he said, the truth is like a diamond. The more you chisel it, the brighter it shines. So perhaps, you know, coming from the midst of all the persecution done to him in exile, he is able to come out with such statements, which has proven true. So when you ask now A, B, C, D, E, and all of this alphabetical order of those that followed him, well, the exaggeration they've done over the past 36 years was actually all a form of falsification.
And to think that, Rita, that of course, the claim of one side is that there's so much fake news used in the campaign by their opponents, but in fact, there was also a falsehood mobilized
in all
and
their
as you said,
accusations.
over 36 years.
Yeah.
Yes, 36 years indeed.
Well, institutionalized, I think is the word, because the disinformation that's been happening right now is mainly social media driven, right? Anyone with an internet connection can create content online. Very different from this, I should say, almost 4 decades of vilification that is not that came from institutions themselves. You know, that's supposed to give them a greater heft, a greater a gravity, that all just fell down overnight.
You know what? I think if we push for unity right now, I think it's kind of bleak, no? Because they have not even congratulated and acknowledged the fact that he won, that he is our new president-elect, you know? So to me, we still have to keep on praying, because we can never have that kind of unity, the kind of healing that we need, because definitely this country, the people are so wounded, definitely. They were promised many things during several yellow regimes and at the same time with President Duterte. But the President Duterte naman, people wanted continuity, you know. They wanted the build, they wanted the war on drugs, you know. So those good things that they think that the President Duterte was successful, no? So that was one of the reasons of his victory also. What do you think?
But the ones you're talking about, babe, are self-inflicted. Nobody has caused them to suffer this much. The pain that they talk about is actually masochistic. I mean, they call it upon themselves to be, I'm so wounded, I'm in pain, I'm in grief, I'm crying. So
I have to fight back.
it's not,
Ganon diba?
well, it's like a little child that you left in the corner and forgot to get him out from there. So, but you speak about the men of the cloth, and there was one recently who was screaming out and saying, whatever happened to us? How did we become like this? How did it happen that all of this dread and etc. is happening? Well, you can throw the question back at him. Whatever happened to you? Perhaps that's the question you have to ask them. Yung mga nakasutana, all of you wearing these skirts. So whatever happened to you? As you said, it's a small fraction, while the rest would rather remain silent. Silence is the best defense in many ways, especially if you could see that many of your peers are actually screaming out there with so many inanities. So that is the best defense they have. But now they should speak. You've mentioned the policy of the CBCP to be above it all. Nobody can be ever above it all except God. He is the only one above us all. We are all in this mundane world. That's precisely leave to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's.
The idea, Rita, of somehow coming together in the midst of all this division, our Lord actually spelled it out. We must follow God, which we are religious people, and it's even enshrined in our Constitution. So first thing, we, of course, come together under God. But the other thing is, we need to reach out to those in need. That's another key to unity. The reason there is division is because some people feel left out. They feel aggrieved. And unfortunately, if they're aggrieved, then they become prey to those who would exploit that for antisocial, violent, terrorist, or ideological ambitions. And so we have to reach out to them. That can unify us. But without that, without actually exercising Christian charity as a nation, then unity will always, not be out of reach.
Definitely they were persecuted. It's in the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are persecuted, right? For they shall see God.
Well, there is this concept, right, within Catholic social teaching, which is called the preferential option for the poor. That's very much scripture-based, the Beatitudes you did mention. And what one danger there, when Tita Rita was talking about men of the cloth sort of taking hostage this preferential option for the poor to mean radicalizing them. The danger there is, violence begets more violence, and where, when you talk about the option for the poor, it's basically simple. You pay them fair wages, you pay them on time. You do not belittle their humanity. But when that kind of conversation turns into something like go against the capitalists, or you overturn the system, that's where you experience things like what happened back in the early 70s, where President Marcos did what he had to do in order to save democracy.
Exactly. So that is where sometimes you talk about division. Actually, we are 7,107 islands, and that is the archipelagic division that we actually are in. So, as I said, again, we go back to the spirituality of it all, which has lost its meaning in many of our lives. We have, even Pope Francis took notice of this, that you divest yourself of all of this wealth. I mean, you call it the Bishop's Palace. You have the ornate chairs of the Louis XIV and Louis XV, furniture, structure, and all of this. And where you have the Pope just riding a Volkswagen when he was before he was a Pope. So all of this, I think, is where we ourselves too will have to go into ourselves and find out where have we gone wrong. I talk about this priest who just came out screaming, now what has happened to our country? And I ask the question, what has happened to you? And maybe that's the question we all of us will have to ask ourselves.
Correct.
Likewise.
Well said. You know, we sort of like would like to analyze what really happened. Why would he get 31 million votes as compared to her 14 million votes, you know? And to think that the church was on their side, and yet we won, you know? What happened, really? What really happened, no? What do you think?
Well, just going by the statistics, Bongbong Marcos already had 36% support during the vice presidential race. He and Vice President Robredo both had 36%. Robredo's 36% dwindled because she was criticizing a popular president, President Duterte. So she lost ground there. Marcos retained the 36 and built on it. So you just had to add another 15 to 20%, and you're at over 50%. So
Exactly.
that's your 50.
Analysis.
I mean,
Very good.
and it's not. I didn't make this up. It's there in Pulse Asia, and it's
The Pythagorean theory of numbers, exactly. Yeah, if you go by it, the surveys already indicating that he was already leading on the first run. I mean, it's like in the Olympics, you know, you look at it, the 100-meter dash, etc., and all the hurdles, and he was already out front. So,
and of course the electorate did want someone who was affiliated with the administration. When Sara Duterte was still kind of in the running, she was stopping it. She had 28%.
Right.
yeah.
Marcos and Isko Moreno were at 15. That was the breakdown early on. Then she dropped out. Well, where would the 28% go? It would go to the candidate who was seen as the one who was affiliated with the administration. Guess what? It went to Marcos.
Yeah, exactly.
So he 28, 15, there you go. You get 50 plus
Yeah,
percent.
it could have been a two fight, right? So we didn't need all of these other candidates. Parang kawawa naman yung mga other candidates. They only got 1 million, some like
Well,
3 million, 2 million lang, you know.
It's
so.
probably good that you have, of course, people had a wide choice. But ultimately, the great majority, as we saw in the high approval ratings of the President Duterte, that was looking for a candidate that would continue the governance of Duterte, and they picked Marcos.
Exactly.
Of course, why wouldn't they pick Marcos? The daughter of the president is his running mate, for God's sake.
Anyway, the hour went so fast, okay? And I'd like to hear your parting message. I'd like you to talk to our televiewers, talk to our voters, talk to those who have been hurt by the painful loss. And also you can talk to our beloved bishops, priests, who are really close to us in our hearts. Okay? Let's start with you, Francis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tita Baby. I did not even realize that this was already an hour long. The conversation was so interesting. But, you know, speaking from the point of view of a former seminarian, right? We know that the church itself is infallible, but the people are, right? Very obvious. And this reminds me of a story, a bit apocryphal, of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was, of course, very anti-clerical, right? And he spoke to this French cardinal, and he said, "I will destroy the Catholic Church." To which the cardinal replied, "Mr. Bonaparte, no need to do that. We have been doing it for the past 2,000 years." So that tells you that what happened in the past 3 months is a blip within the church's 2,000-year history. And church people have done much, much worse many, many hundreds of years ago. I would like to say that, you know, we will get over this sooner rather than later. And let's stop unfriending each other on Facebook because having or living within this thought bubble is never helpful.
Maybe it's peaceful. You know, we have unfriend each other, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Rita? Of course, we'll have part two because
okay.
we'll be talking about
Yes.
all
Well,
those questions we had
again,
in mind.
I keep going back to the Bishop of Canterbury who said that I am the king's good servant, but I am God's first. So that's a message to all of those who are the fraction of those men of the cloth who feel that they already behave like demigods on this earth. That's the heaven and earth that they want to speak about. So whether they're angels or otherwise, remember that Lucifer, the brightest of them all, actually began with that great sin of vanity and pride. And also for all of us, prayer is still the best of our communication with each other and with our God. It's not what we have memorized in school or what we read in our missals and all of this, but it comes from our heart. And how often do we forget to listen to our heart? We are so brilliant sometimes that our lives get so complicated with our thoughts. But the heart just beats, and that's exactly where we have to go, into our hearts, and remember that we are all just one big family as the children of a great God.
In the end, we'll just have to campaign for God and for saving souls.
Exactly.
You know, instead of campaigning for others. Okay, Rick?
I'm glad Rita talked about being a family under God. That's really the key to unity. We have to be, again, back together under God. There are differences, political differences, but those really are well below our unity under God. And being united under God, that also demands that we care for each other, especially the least of our brethren, which our Lord himself said, whatever you do for them, you do for me. So that's the key to our unity. And really, that's the key to our progress as a nation. Because if we take care of those in need, then our nation will grow economically, socially, intellectually, and all the way spiritually too.
Amen to that, Rick. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we can pray together. So we can pray for the post-election. Together, we say, God of all nations,
God of all nations,
Father
Father
of the human family, we give you thanks for the freedom we exercise and the many blessings of democracy we enjoy in our beloved country, the Philippines. We ask for your protection and guidance for all who devote themselves to the common good, working for justice and peace at home and around the world. We lift up to you all our duly elected leaders and public servants, those who will serve us as President, Vice President, Senators, Congressmen, Governors, Board Members, Mayors, Councilors, Party List Legislators, and those in the military.
Heal us and unite us, O Lord, with a common purpose, dedication, and commitment to achieve liberty and justice in the years ahead for all people, and especially those who are most vulnerable in our nation.
We ask this, Father, in the mighty name of the risen Lord Jesus, to the loving intercession of our Blessed Mother, Queen of Peace. Amen. Thank you for staying with us the past hour. Let us pray for ways to get involved in nation building. Let us be a great part to make this administration succeed. Surely, we can disagree in a manner that is still gracious and in a way that still honors our leaders. We can air out opinions in a respectful way, and instead of condemning or bashing our leaders on social media, it is best to encourage them by supporting government programs that will help the nation move forward. You and I can make a difference. Let me quote Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 to 14. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive, and above all this, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Government leaders have a huge role in the rise or fall of a nation. However, the success of the country does not solely depend on them. That means we too, as an individual, have the responsibility and the privilege to be involved in nation building. So pray for opportunities to serve your kababayans. Be aware of the current political and social issues, then ask yourself what you can contribute to improve the situation. God has given us gifts, talents, resources, and abilities. May we all use them in serving others, spreading hope to the nation, and bringing glory to the name of Jesus. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms, as written in 1 Peter verses 4 to 10. In behalf of my co-host, Mr. Rick Sarudo, our director, Mr. Ben Yalong, we thank our wonderful guests, Ms. Rita Gadi and Mr. Francis Pacheco, for this enriching and insightful hour. See you again next week as we give you another inspirational and engaging program here in Heart to Heart Talk. Good night and God bless everyone.